Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday the 13th. It really is. It's Friday the 13th, April 13th, 2018. And I don't know, should we be worried about that sort of thing? It always conjures up images, of course. And once you take conscious notice of the fact that it's Friday the 13th, all sorts of weird things begin to happen, and you begin to get nervous and screw things up. And that's how, I guess, the myth perpetuates itself. But here we are. Daily Co's Radio is live now. It is Friday the 13th. And Bill says all the way from Portland, Maine, that I hope Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, isn't going to do a show from under a ladder. Ha ha ha, but seriously, we're all doomed. That is true. I'm not under a ladder. I am under, I'm under the gun, so to speak, I guess, and both of them being dangerous, equally dangerous. Forks, spoons, knives, swimming pools, ladders, cars, what have you. I'll get under every single one of them today, just to prove the point. I don't even know where to begin today. We might be heading into an emergency broadcast over the firing of Rod Rosenstein. We might head into an emergency broadcast over finding out that his name is pronounced differently in some way or another. I don't really know. We might be heading into not an emergency broadcast, but a sense of panic. The word is, for whatever reason, Donald Trump, I think, to trigger the libs, is floating the idea of pardoning Scooter Libby, who's he's not in prison or anything. He was convicted, of course, of, well, obstruction of justice, lying to investigators, among other things. And I guess, some people are trying to theorize, and there's really no other reason for it. So the theory is fairly sound, as theories about crazy a-holes go. But the theory goes, if he'll pardon Scooter Libby, that's a signal to everybody else that if they lie and, go down for him to protect him, there's a pardon in the offing, I guess. So continue to lie to investigators, everybody, on my behalf, and I will pardon you afterwards if I'm still president of the United States, I guess. And there's really very little reason otherwise. Scooter Libby owes nothing to him, and he owes nothing to Scooter Libby. No particular favors, I think, that Dick Cheney is prepared to do for him. It's just purely, I think I'll piss everybody off with this one. And, yeah, probably to signal to people, I'm willing to do dumb pardons and to take political heat because I don't care about the presidency or anything I'm doing, but I do care about myself, so continue to protect me. James Comey speaking out, I guess, is his book now out? This is a big weekend for him. Donald Trump going absolutely bonkers on Twitter at the moment. Rage tweeting, I guess he's about 20 minutes into it, and 45 minutes into it, and he's stopped for the time being, but he's clearly, curled up watching television in the residence and screaming about, all sorts of things. This morning's anger tweets have been, tremendous pressure is building like never before for the border wall, an end to crime-cradling sanctuary cities. Started the wall in San Diego where the people were pushing really hard to get it. They will soon be protected. Yay! Boo, actually. But this one, I think this connected pair of tweets is the one that's getting all the attention. James Comey is a proven, all caps, leaker and liar. Virtually everyone in Washington thought he should be fired for the terrible job he did until he was in fact fired. He leaked classified information for which he should be prosecuted. He lied to Congress under oath. He is a weak and untruthful slimeball who was, as time has proven, a terrible director of the FBI. His handling of the crooked Hillary Clinton case and the events surrounding it will go down as one of the worst botched jobs of history. Oh, I can think of a bigger one. But okay. It was my great honor to fire James Comey. Wow, is this guy ever going down? It's unhinged. It's stupid. What else are we going to say about it? And of course, yes, he's, he leaked classified information. P.S. I'm going to pardon Scooter Libby. That takes about 1 second. to deal with that. But, the scene, of course, of a president of the United States tweeting about a director of the FBI being an untruthful slimeball. And by the way, could you project a little more, please? A weak and, what did he say? He's a weak and untruthful slimeball. I cannot think of a better description of Donald Trump, even if I actually try, which I am not going to do. But, It's of course an unbelievable situation. I cannot stress it enough, but I can't linger on it any longer. It's just unbelievable that this guy is alive and breathing. I can't believe his brain functions at this level. He should have, there's no brain function. He should be declared brain dead and buried at this point. There's nothing going on in his head. Nothing. Now, Comey, I guess, is it excerpts from his book that are being circulated that he keeps, I keep seeing, the P tape is back in the news, mostly from, I think, excerpts from the book in which Comey is just saying, I can't believe that, I, as FBI director, I couldn't believe that I was in the position of not really being 100% positive one way or another whether or not the new incoming president of the United States was on tape watching a pee show by prostitutes in Moscow. I just didn't think I was ever going to be in this position, and here we are. But also, apparently at some point, Trump says to Comey while he's still FBI director, you gotta look into this thing. He's pushing. You've got to look into the P-tape thing because I want it disproved, which is going to be enormously difficult because the P-tape is real. But okay, it's a tall order and also not really something that you really want to task the director of the FBI with doing when there's so much other important stuff doing. I mean, I guess we should point out in a nod to Armando, Trump is not entirely wrong here. Comey did do a terrible job, especially right at the end, and maybe only, really, not only. There are other things, of course, we could point out that he did wrong, but he did, in fact, botch the Hillary Clinton situation. No doubt about it. And he probably should have been fired over it. And he's trying to explain himself in the book, and it's not really cutting it with most people. But that doesn't mean that Trump is actually, obviously, correct in the way he handled any part of this. But he's not entirely wrong that Comey botched that situation. Of course, he equally botched the situation of saying, if he was going to tell people, yes, Hillary Clinton is under investigation, he might as well have said, and so is Donald Trump. And I mean, how hard was that to come to that conclusion? If I don't want to interfere in the election, you're talking about a situation which would be, it's a nightmare, perhaps, for the country, if what's really happening here is both candidates are under investigation. But if you need to announce, for whatever reason, that an investigation is being revisited about Hillary Clinton, virtually anybody else in the world who could have been FBI director at the time would probably say, the impossible dream here, if you have the nightmare situation of 11 days before the election, having to announce, convincing yourself that you have to announce that Hillary Clinton is, they were reopening the investigation, which wasn't really what was happening, but that's the way people were going to take it, that you are reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. You would say, all right, I really shouldn't be announcing this because I don't want to affect the election, but I somehow feel, and he had an interesting explanation, it's the one we posited on the show, that he was certain Hillary Clinton was going to win, she was going to be the next president, and he didn't want the FBI or himself or whatever to be in the position of being accused by Republicans of having covered that investigation, as dumb as it was, up in order to protect her so that she could become president. So he announced it, and he just figured, I think if I'm understanding correctly, he figured she would overcome that announcement, become president as planned, and everything would be okay for him somehow. I'm not really certain how he thought that was going to be the case, but maybe he was sacrificing himself for the betterment of the country and protecting the presumptive new president from accusations of illegitimacy, whatever. Now, Obviously, he gives consideration to the fact that, well, it could be perceived as enormously prejudicial against Hillary Clinton for me to say this. Now, I do think she'll overcome that. She didn't, by the way. Thanks very much. And almost anybody else who would have been in his position would have said, well, as ludicrous as it is, wouldn't it be great if I had to make this announcement, if I agreed with Comey's reasoning? Wouldn't it be fantastic? It would be like a miracle, a sign from God, virtually, if I were able to also say, well, we might as well mention Donald Trump is also under investigation by the FBI. So it's a wash. Right? But that would be impossible, because there's no way in the world you could possibly come down 11 days before the election to a situation where both major party candidates were, quote unquote, under investigation by the FBI. So stop dreaming, boy. Get to work, right? No. But it was true. He really was under investigation. But that one was secret, and we didn't want to let the Russians know that. I just can't believe he passed up the opportunity to be able to say, listen, what's happening here is not reopening of an investigation, but we are following up on one other lead just to be thorough, and we're announcing this because we don't want anybody to think that the FBI is ignoring things or looking the other way. They are, but we don't want them to think that about this situation and about the new incoming president of the United States, whoever that may be. And I say that because if you think, well, I'll vote for Donald Trump, I don't really like him, but I'll vote for Donald Trump because at least he's not under investigation by the FBI, you would be wrong about that. He is under investigation by the FBI, and I know that comes as a surprise to many of you, and I'm sorry that it came down this way, but I was going to keep that information from you in order to not affect the election, and I was going to keep the information from you about Hillary Clinton in order to not affect the election, but I've made this prediction about the outcome of the election based on the polls, and here's my. But we're back to the same thing. I mean, it was a ridiculous thing for him to conclude, but why he didn't then say, So I have the sad duty of informing you that this is happening with regard to Hillary Clinton's emails, but I have the equally equally sad task or / happy news to be able to tell you that it doesn't matter because Donald Trump is under investigation for colluding with the Russians. And then, of course, then people would complain, well, you're accusing one of having improper email practices and the other of being in the pocket of Vladimir Putin. That's not the same thing. And you are affecting the outcome of the election. But look, beggars can't be choosers. If you are handed an election where you're actually able to say, don't worry about the fact that one of these people is under investigation because both of them are. And if you're looking to vote for the major party candidate without a current FBI investigation, you are out of luck at this point. And you're just going to have to vote for the, I hate to say it, but you're going to have to vote for the lesser of two evils, which you were honestly, many people felt that they were going to do that anyway. And we have all sorts of issues with those folks as well, but we're not going to take those up. All right. Let's see. Armando is texting me in the background here. Let's see. You should review the Rosenstein memo on Comey again. I should. Maybe you want to do that. Everything Rosenstein wrote is proven true by Comey. Another important point is the email investigation was complete horse crap from the word go, a political hit by the ICIG who hated Hillary. All of which is true, and we may not even have to say that much more about it. I mean, Comey doesn't do a great job of defending himself. He explains what he was thinking. I'm glad to have it. I already knew it. It's nice to see it in print, which I didn't do yet, but it's nice for other people to see it in print and then print it out for me to see in bits and pieces on Twitter, because it's always nice to know that you guessed correctly, although I don't know how you could have guessed otherwise. So it's a huge mess, and whatever. It hasn't resolved itself, but it has resulted in the interesting situation of having a weak scumbag, liar, whatever it is, slime ball of a president projecting once again and deciding that, Comey is the real problem here, as opposed to an idiot as president, a corrupt idiot at that. And that's really a lot worse. That doesn't mean we forgive Comey for anything. And I always think it's funny to tweet around that, ironically anyway, but also seriously, which is what's so ironic about it. The picture of the lonely protesting woman with the resign Comey, or was it Comey resign? I can't remember whether it was resign Comey or Comey resign sign, and just sitting quietly outside the FBI building. And that was a Republican protester, by the way, at the time, wanting Comey to resign for having announced that the FBI had concluded earlier that there was really nothing to worry about in the Hillary Clinton emails investigation after all. And Republicans didn't take it very well. All right. So I think the president is done with his rage tweeting, but I'm hoping he does some more projection for the rest of the day, just because it's so awfully entertaining to watch. Many other issues to bring up today. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to end. A lot to do. Maybe a good thing to do would be to start off with a recorded segment that we have from Eric Postman, which I've been sitting on for a while, and for a while I forgot I was even sitting on it, and it's still relevant, of course, and maybe even more so because it's about the Parkland high school kids, the Marjorie Stoneman, and Stoneman Douglas high school students who are, of course, leading the national movement, the protest against the ridiculous gun laws that we're saddled with in this country. And it's about that point in time where people are saying, hey, let's not drop this issue. Let's not forget about this. Let's not lose the momentum. And indeed they haven't. And it's David Hogue in particular. And is it Hogue? Because people keep tweeting things that make it look like they think the pronunciation is Hogg, and that's hilarious. And I don't know, maybe he actually pronounces it that way. We had, my college, we had a H-O-G-G Hall, Hogue Hall. So I'm going with that pronunciation. But he's been much in the news, of course, not only for his leading role in the protest, but because he is a leading lightning rod in the protests and has been on the TV machine quite a bit, and of course drawing a lot of fire from conservatives who are angry that he has a different idea than they do about what should happen with guns as a matter of policy in this country. And they're freaking out and saying things that are getting them in trouble. And maybe we'll round some of those things up here. But why don't we take a pause quickly before I run up against a break and roll Eric's commentary here on the subject.
Good morning, Kagro. It's Eric in Orlando. The students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, have set the bar for all of us, speaking truth to power fearlessly and convincingly, all while still grieving for their classmates who were taken from them. While we're all impressed with their abilities, it shouldn't all have to fall on them to carry us. But unfortunately, that's the way our society is structured. It often takes a cataclysmic event to propel activism. I think of John Walsh, who was a career first husband and father. After the kidnapping and murder of his son Adam, also here in Florida, he changed the course of his life, tirelessly advocating and ultimately creating America's Most Wanted. But Walsh is the outlier. Those of us who have joined the rat race, whether we've experienced tragedies or not, face invisible barriers when it comes to our activism. I go back to a quote which I believe is attributed to Churchill. If you're not an idealist at 20, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative at 40, you have no brain. Or something like that. Let's say hypothetically that I'm in my 40s, and I have a middle management job with a large corporation that prides itself on political neutrality. Am I going to put myself out there and go after the NRA? Am I ready for the spotlight or crosshairs that comes with that? A larger electronic profile in this day and age comes without the expectation of privacy in one's personal and professional life. What if your employer doesn't care for the attention you're receiving, or afraid it will reflect on them? This is the dilemma we all face in America. We have freedom of speech, but rarely can fully express it. Unless your employer supports your 2-hour daily podcast, then that's another story. When your free speech is connected to your ability to pay your mortgage, car payments, kids' college tuition, revolving debt, etc., then you understand the tension. Now, let's say, hypothetically, I'm a TV producer, and let's say I get an offer that conflicts wildly with my political beliefs. Let's say I'm offered the job of executive producer of the Sean Hannity Show at $400,000 a year plus benefits. Well, my first instinct would be to get as much money as I could up front, sabotage the show in perpetuity, and walk away without legal consequence. But that's not realistic. So like Lieutenant Commander Data's offer from the Borg Queen, I'd actually consider it for a split second before realizing I couldn't live with myself, even at $400,000 a year, plus benefits. But I know some people that would take it, not because they're any less tied to their political philosophy than I, but because the responsibility to those in their life is too great to pass up that kind of financial security. Which brings me back to the original point. The Parkland students can go and speak truth to power. They can go all over the country and represent the beliefs for millions of us and advocate for the changes in our laws that we desperately need. And they can do that because they don't have to worry about putting food on the table or medical bills or making sure the child support payment is received by the first of the month. It is these teenagers who are in prime position to make lasting change because, as individuals, they are not slaves to the status quo. So maybe they can recalibrate the status quo for all of us. Unfortunately, we have put such a great responsibility on them when they have already dealt with so much. They didn't choose this life. I'm sure they'd rather be playing video games and getting ready for college in a whole community. But they were propelled into it by the absurdity of the construct of this world we live in, and now they may be best positioned to save it.
Thanks, Eric. And as I was listening and trying to round up the actual stories about the various threats against David Hogue, and I'm still in the middle of that process. The first one that I recall was a broadcaster about whom I had heard nothing prior to all this. Let's see, where's the New York Post might have a fascinating take on this stuff. But he's one of the, since Sinclair Broadcasting is much in the news, it was worth pointing out that he's a Sinclair property, or at least this show was. Here's the deal. The New York Post's story on this one, a conservative commentator who tweeted that he would use, quote, a hot poker to assault David Hogue. He was basically saying, as a lot of these stupid idiot conservatives have done, they take personal offense at David Hogue saying, hey, I would like to see this, that, or the other thing as gun policy. And it's gun stuff is just that kind of hot button issue where people do take it personally. I want to be, where otherwise it's like, you're advocating for a regular policy position that very many normal people hold. In fact, the majority of normal people in this country, vast majority of normal people, hold the opinion that, AR-15s are essentially weapons of war and don't belong in civilian hands, and we should be controlling access to weapons. And there are many, many suggestions for how we might do that or render them less deadly or less frequently deadly anyway. But many people react to this, of course. The prevailing sentiment among the really obsessed gun nuts, which is, by the way, entirely driven by the NRA and other gun enthusiast / gun nut organizations. They love to react to these things as over the top as they can. This is by insisting that every suggestion that any weaponry be curtailed and, access to weaponry be curtailed as an assault on the Constitution, the fabric of the country. And, the connective tissue here is, it's the Second Amendment to the Constitution that supposedly guarantees the right to keep and bear arms. Depending on how you read this thing, like if you're a normal person, you read it and say, I read the whole thing, and it says it's about being in a militia. And if you are a gun enthusiast, you say, no, the sentence construction is very awkward, and so therefore that means that everybody should be able to have atomic weapons. Okay, what a reasonable way of looking at things. But starting from that starting point, of course, people then say, well, if what part, as they love to say, of shall not be infringed do you not understand? If you suggest that the size of the ammunition magazine, the capacity of the magazine, for the weapon of my choice ought to be curtailed in size, well, that is an assault on the very fabric. You hate America, is what you're saying, because shall not be infringed. Don't you understand that? You're now infringing on it, even though, yes, the Supreme Court has plenty of precedent for acknowledging that there are reasonable limitations on that and every right. People just pass by that and ignore it. And so they feel like, well, this whole program of rhetoric that the NRA and others support and perpetuate is aimed at maximum fury over any suggestion of any common sense anything. You want background checks? You hate America. You are a legitimate eliminationist target. People who kill you should be considered to be patriots. And that leads to people like this guy. I don't even know what's his name here. And I'm not going to find out probably before the break either, because a pop-up ad is going to jump up in the way and get in the way. Here we are. Allman is his last name. Jamie Allman. I never heard of the guy. Anyway, not a surprise. But he has a talk show. Is it TV? I don't even know. Yeah. Apparently based in St. Louis, Missouri, and it's a television show. And he decided to join in the eliminationist rhetoric, and he was going to teach David Hogue, how dare you ask for reasonable gun laws? I'm going to punish you by sticking a red-hot poker up your... I don't know how he put it, but... Well, let's see. There's nowhere that a red-hot poker really belongs when it comes to the human anatomy, but you have some idea of what he was going to do about that. And then I guess it only struck him afterwards, oh my gosh, this is a kid I'm talking about. I could be in real trouble. And he was. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching Kagro X or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So I left off in the middle of the story, of course. You have likely already heard it. What's the guy's name here? Jamie Allman. Sinclair Broadcast Group spokesman Ron Tarosian, in case you're interested in knowing who that is, said in a statement Monday that Jamie Allman's resignation had been accepted and his KDNL TV show canceled. Yes, when I originally saw the threat, I guess I had the same thought as everybody else in America, because what else could you possibly think about the insistence that a grown-ass man was going to sexually assault a child with a red-hot poker and torture him to death because he wanted a different policy, public policy with regard to firearms than he wanted. And child molestation was the obvious answer. Well, that didn't last very long, and in fact, it cost him his job. And remember, what was most ironic, entertaining, sad, however you want to look at it, about the situation was Allman at that point was reacting not just to David Hogue's insistence that we ought to perhaps consider a different policy outcome with regard to firearms in this country, but also part of the backlash against the conservative backlash. You know what? Forget it. It's not even a backlash. It's just stupid conservative nonsense. They were angry at that point that Laura Ingraham had leveled attacks against David Hogue, and although quite dumb and almost not even rising to the level of attacks, it was just a silly thing to say. I don't know what was motivating her to choose this topic to talk about, because honestly, she could have attacked him a lot more effectively, or you know what, even ineffectively, but more personally. She had made the comments about him not getting into certain of the colleges to which he had applied, which is an awfully stupid area of attack, considering how many colleges lots of very capable people don't get into, but okay. And of course that she only knew that because he had acknowledged publicly that that was the case, and also that he did get into some other rather good schools. So I don't know. She decided she was going to take a cheap shot, and Hogue and his allies organized against her, and it had cost her, in the meantime, most of her sponsorships. And then she had to go on a leave of absence from the show, and you know, so then there was the big conservative reaction to it. Oh my gosh, this is chilling free speech, and there's a million reasons why that's foolish, and we've been over them on the show. Nobody is guaranteed financial sponsors for their speech, and it's not government action, so it's not really under the purview of the First Amendment anyway, so just drop the whole thing. Which also implies, by the way, that you guys misunderstood the Constitution as a compact from the beginning, and so your rage about firearms policy, while wrong-footed anyway, is also largely without basis. But at least it had one foot in reality, in that Hogue and others before him and since were advocating for a change in government policy that would, in fact, put you at odds with government action with respect to access to firearms. That's a much better place to start. But the Constitution is a nuanced thing, and you guys don't do nuance. Obviously, red hot poker up the butt, I guess. This is what, I don't know what wording he used. Maybe it's even here in the, but, I don't know where else you ram a hot poker. I'm going to ram you in the wrist with a red hot poker. No one ever says that. I think we know where they usually threaten to do that. But anyway, at least you were on better constitutional grounds there. Laura Ingraham was making a tremendous mistake, and it cost her. And I think that Ullman was reacting as much to the gun issue as to the free speech misunderstanding, and was trying to build on that. And I'll show you. You'll get a red hot poker, not just for your terrible firearms policy suggestion, but also for your disregard for my misunderstanding of the First Amendment. Okay, and so it ended up, ironically, costing him his job. I thought that was extra ironic and a little bit funny, too, that riding to Laura Ingraham's defense as she was on the brink of losing her television/radio, whatever, broadcast career, he went so hard at it that he ended up losing his own. So that was kind of funny, too. And there's more. There's a second threat that was circulating yesterday, and I guess I'll have to look in my Twitter stream to see if I can find it, but another gun dummy with a YouTube channel putting out a video threatening somebody, and in this case, again, it happens to be David Hogue, which is a very dumb target to pick at this point. Here it is. And I saw the tweet of Daniel Kibblesmith. Loved your work with your partner, Bitsmith, Kibble and Bitsmith. Fantastic production. Anyway, who is Daniel Kibblesmith? He is a writer for the Colbert Late Show and a number of other things as well. And he's got the right message here. I mean, I don't know if there's profanity in this video clip or not, so I won't bother playing it, but I will describe it to you. Suffice to say, it is a gun nerd/nut who has decided to go out and shoot his assault rifles. They all look like, variants on the AR-15. And he's doing it in one of the One of the places, one of the fabulous high-tech areas that gun enthusiasts like to use for their pastime, which really leads to the natural respect that you want to accord and afford to gun enthusiasts. They have dug a sand pit somewhere in the middle of, nowhere, USA, so that they can fire guns in it and use the walls of the sand pit as the berm to stop a backstop to stop the bullets. And what he's done is he's put together a 42 second video clip of himself, and I said gun nut / gun nerd, and it's exactly as you would imagine. He's wearing a black t-shirt, got a black baseball hat on, he's got a scruffy neck beard, he's slightly overweight, and he's videotaping himself looking to teach a tough guy, hard-ass lesson to David Hogue, and I believe he calls him, bitch in the video or some dumb crap like that. And, for this rounded fellow to be making physical threats is a laugh in itself, but then, of course, he adds some guns to it. And the idea is he has set up a makeshift shooting range for himself in the very respectable setting of a, godforsaken sand pit somewhere, because everyone should respect gun culture. Dramatic pause. And he's set up a target, one of those people-shaped paper targets, and I guess somewhere printed out a big photo of David Hogue's face, and he has stapled it to the top of the target, and he is videotaping himself shooting the target with David Hogue's face stapled to the top of it. Take that, bitch! A piece of paper just got shot in my S-hole sand pit. Now I'm gonna go have some Twinkies. That'll effing teach you to have an opinion about public policy in this country. God damn it. Respect gun culture. By the way, now he speaks to the camera, which is how I can tell you that he's got a scruffy neck beard. And then he pulls up over his face the favorite skull motif face mask that gun nuts everywhere and alt-right fight boy club loser wackos everywhere are wearing. And by the way, something I noted for you on one of the shows several months ago, that it also favored by such fabulous and respectable individuals as the Sutherland Springs church shooter. They made a point of letting everybody know that he showed up in one of those skull face masks. They love these things. The gun nuts can't get enough of these skull face masks. Now, he has just spoken to the camera, and then he puts the face mask on for the shooting part of it, which is like, I don't know whether that, adds a little, tumescence to the whole situation, and everybody really enjoys the shooting that much more. I mean, is it to protect against dust? It's certainly not to hide his identity. He's just spoken to the camera. Anyway, Kibblesmith takes this video and tweets it out with the comment, "It's weird how many responsible gun owners have no idea that death threats are illegal." And it is. It's so weird. And we've been through this before, and there was that Tennessee gun nut who threatened, anybody tries to come and get my guns, or, if Obama signs that executive order that he's thinking about, why I'll something, and he, they make threats about shooting anybody that comes near him. And of course, it turns out that the guy is like a gun instructor somewhere, tactical gunfighting instructor, who's the guy supposedly who's going to teach you to respect weapons and be a respectable part of gun culture that we're all supposed to love and understand, and no one will ever make a mistake because I'll teach them how to properly handle a weapon. Except I can't help myself but get on my YouTube channel and make threats against people, which is 1, illegal, and 2, a gun crime, and 3, leads to the loss of your guns and your licenses, or should, except that you live in Tennessee and judges tend to look the other way on such things because, I don't know why. Anyway, yeah, it is a little bit weird how many responsible gun owners have no idea that death threats are illegal. The guy went out, he made the death threat. He's an idiot. I don't know whether he's in any trouble or not, but they just can't seem to help themselves, and it's an amazing thing. And everyone wants to pile on, and it's like one of these nuts after the other, whether their main thing is conservative talk show stuff or YouTube channel about my guns, it's like I've figured it out. I'm the one. I'm going to get the winning score here. I'm going to be the one that figures out how to legally threaten the life of David Hogue. And then that'll change everything. 80% of the country wants background checks. But once I shoot a paper plate with David Hogue's face pasted to it, obviously everybody's going to say, oh, that's the genius we've been waiting for. I'm going to grow a beard like that. I'm going to have a couple extra chocodiles today and see if I can become like this guy. I mean, he's like the Winston Churchill of gun rights. I guess I want this guy's oration skills, and maybe all I have to do is stop taking care of myself physically and buy a couple of guns, and people will listen to me. Well, I don't know if he had anything to lose at this point, but he probably had his YouTube channel shut down. So I guess there's that. So speaking of that and other gun issues, I guess I'll also take a moment, at least, probably half an hour, to talk about the young woman who, I guess, just graduated or is about to graduate. What is it? It's April. So I guess she's set to graduate from college in Tennessee. Brenna Spencer is her name, and her photo went viral, sort of, I guess. And I don't know if she was responding to Tommy, whatever her last name is. Most people screw up her first name. What's her last name? Lauren? Ralph Lauren? Who says Ralph Lauren? I found out recently. Anyway, with her, she circulated a picture of herself with a gun tucked in her yoga pants waistband. Which, I mean, by the way, do bring guns to yoga. It's really smart. And she took a picture of herself. Maybe she had the idea first. Well, one, she's wearing a Women for Trump t-shirt, which I think is kind of like an Uber service that delivers to the president. I am not certain what that's supposed to mean. And she is lifting up that t-shirt to reveal a gun tucked in the waistband of her tight white jeans, which, what date is it? Can you wear white pants this early? Maybe in Tennessee you can get away with that. And revealing the gun, and it's part of a collection of pictures, by the way, I saw being circulated the other day of young women doing the same thing. Like, this is the way to be a sexy conservative. I have a gun in my pants, which used to be a joke. Is that a gun in your pants, or are you just, why would you have that? Okay. I guess that's of interest. And we could make all sorts of references from there, but it's unusual, and I guess it's supposed to be meaningful to conservatives. Anyway, she claims that this is her college graduation photo, which means that she's graduating from college, which is astounding all by itself. And this is supposed to be her political statement. I don't take normal graduation photos. And who does, really? Let's be honest. I mean, come on. But it occurred to me, of course, in seeing this thing being circulated, and it was recirculated yesterday, came to my attention. A conservative Twitter personage of some note, perhaps, was tweeting some very interesting observations about it. And in fact, those interesting observations were, he was being very, intellectual about the whole thing. It was all very entertaining. He was, I'll see if I can find this thing. Yeah, here it is. Nolan Ryan Snyder. That's it. Nolan Ryan. Yeah, Snyder. That's an interesting name all by itself. And, I don't know. He's, a regular dude, I guess, out there and being conservative, which it happens. People do this. He's not a guy with a big following, but somebody retweeted this tweet in which he said, "I wish more women realized how much of their agency is lost when they depend on the state to keep them safe. Here's a woman who embraces the inevitable responsibilities of life and liberty in a free country. she doesn't rely on anyone else for protection. That's his commentary on Brenna Spencer saying, I don't take normal college graduation photos. Here's a gun in my pants. Not a very safe way, by the way, to carry the gun. I don't know if she normally carries that way. I don't know whether she was just going for dramatic effect. Doesn't really matter. But, so Nolan Ryan Snyder had that very interesting and intellectual observation. I mean, it's wrong and stupid on a number of levels, but it's very well stated. It's cogent, lucid argument overruled. You know what I mean? Anyway, and somebody retweeted that by saying, she's still not going to have sex with you, dude, so just forget about it. And I thought that was rather a funny comeback. But what it reminded me of was, I've seen this pose before. I mean, it's a very dramatic pose of the lifting the shirt to show gun and waistband. And ordinarily, you tend to see that pose featuring an individual of minority extraction very frequently, and being commented on by people like Nolan Ryan Snyder, seeing a black or Hispanic person, male or female, but generally young men, in photos like that. The same Nolan Ryan Snyder very often will offer up comments along the lines of, what a thug, or where are the parents, or this is why we can't have nice things, or whatever. But of course, an attractive young woman does it, and he's pining poetic over it, and talking about how much of women's agency is lost when they depend on the state to keep them safe. Can you imagine seeing a tweet like that about a black kid with a gun, even a toy gun, in his hands, in his pants, whatever? I mean, I do recall that when the conservative community needed very badly to demonize Mike Brown, they scoured his social media profiles to see if they could find a picture of him asserting his agency, either in not depending on the state to keep him safe, or his agency as against the state, one might even posit. But no one offered that view up. I also was reminded very much of the initial discovery back in 2008 when Sarah Palin was brought onto the Republican ticket. The initial discovery of Levi Johnston's Facebook page which was all about how he liked to kick it with the boys in the backyard, shooting cans, and I love my guns, and I'll get up in your face, biatch, if you tend, yeah, right. So, doing all the same things that ordinarily get dismissed as American thuggery, but instead was waved away as boys will be boys. So Brenna Spencer here in a pose that would get you suspended anywhere else if you were a black kid. I mean, you can't even if you're waving to the camera funny and it looks to some weirdo's eyes like that might be a gang sign, you're suspended for 10 days. Gun in the pants, graduation photo, Brenna Spencer, no problem. Black or Hispanic kid, that diploma is being withheld. You're not going to walk with the rest of the class because gun in the pants photo. But white girl can get away with it. I thought that was very interesting. Now, not particularly informative for a Friday afternoon. Time to move on. Yes, but very interesting, I thought. Also, I wanted to reiterate, I guess, before the break, something I brought up yesterday, but I keep seeing the story of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas teacher who left the gun in the bathroom in Deerfield Beach being reported. And I think the Miami Herald in particular, their stories about it have been, I don't know for a fact what this guy is really all about, but it seems to me like the story we read yesterday from the local ABC affiliate had a very different story, and one that made it possible to see this teacher in a much more sympathetic light. The Miami Herald is not as generous, and I appreciate the sentiment. And it's been interesting over the last couple of days because of all the work I've done on gun fail. I've gotten a lot of tweets that point to this story and say the situation here we should be throwing the book at this guy, and there should be no sympathy for this teacher. And they were running a picture of him, I thought, in the Miami Herald version of the story that really made him look like a dangerous gun nut. And I don't think that's really what we're dealing with. And I'm urging people to circulate and read the ABC affiliate's story about him that explains that he is not, at the very least, not carrying a gun in order to counter the point being made by the students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High who are protesting the situation. There are people around the country who are carrying guns and advocating the carrying of guns in order to be in the face of these students, like the two stories I just told you about targeting David Hogue and other activists from the high school. And this teacher, from what I read in the ABC News, ABC affiliate's story, was not like that. He was saying, I support their opposition to the proliferation of guns in the country. I support their call for common sense gun control laws. And I love my students and I don't want to see them victimized. And for lack of any other response, this state is not likely to hand us any tools to do the things that the students really want done. And in the meantime, I absolutely must insist that no one come in here and murder my students without my having something to say about it. And that's his approach. And he has, to my knowledge, not been carrying a gun in school because he respects the laws and rules against that, but he's been carrying a gun on his person, I guess, in preparation, perhaps, saying I'd be willing to go through an arduous training program in order to be allowed to carry a gun to protect my students so that they could continue to call for common sense gun reform, basically. And I think that part of the story, I mean, if it's an accurate reflection of where he's really at, then it's missing from most of the national coverage and from the Miami Herald coverage. And I feel badly for him getting a different kind of coverage that's making people think that he's a hard-headed gun nut and was carrying that gun so that he could signal his political opposition to these kids. And I don't think that that's really the case. And I hope he gets a better I hope he gets a break, and I hope, in terms of his coverage, and that a better, fuller picture, if that's the accurate one, can finally emerge. I urge people to take a look at that one and allow for that possibility. He should be in trouble. You shouldn't drop the charges. He did make that mistake, but he could be a very effective spokesperson, perhaps, if he were given a chance to say, this was my last resort. With respect, my first preference, as he told the ABC affiliate, is to control and curtail access to guns. Absent that, I am willing to take these risks in order to protect these kids. But I mean, it would make a fantastic story to say, in the simplistic equation that's being offered to us by gun advocates who say arm the teachers, I took a look at that as a possibility, and I now think that my example should make it abundantly clear that there are enormous problems. And it's not me assuming a risk. It's me putting a risk on everybody else. And that's the way that arming teachers should be thought of and approached. And I guess that maybe is how at least some people down in Florida are thinking about it, because I have this little bit of news that I can add just before our top of the hour break. Moms demand action, tweeting yesterday, a link to a story I'll have to open up. The brief summary here, that Broward County, Florida, the site of the Parkland school shooting, votes to refuse money to arm school personnel. They have taken a rather level-headed approach to this. It will be controversial in Florida, but there it is. Washington Post reporting is attached to this one. And, long story somewhat short. I'll give you the top couple of paragraphs on this so you can get the details. The school board in Florida's Broward County, where the shooting took place and where 17, as they put it, where 17 people died when a gunman opened fire February 14th at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. to give you the full report on it, voted unanimously against accepting state money so that school personnel can be trained to carry guns on campus. So that was what was in the offing, and they said no. The Florida legislature approved a package of gun control measures, including restrictions on some gun sales, and $67 million for the Coach Aaron Feis, I'm guessing at the pronunciation, I didn't learn it during the initial tragedy, Guardian Program. Coach Aaron Feis Guardian Program. Is that named for the coach who was killed there? I think so. Anyway, $67 million to fund districts that want to arm school staff members. Some legislators originally wanted the money to train teachers, but opposition, including from Governor Rick Scott, led lawmakers to bar most teachers from the training and said other school staff members would be trained. Aaron Feis was a coach at Douglas in Parkland who was shot and killed while shielding students. I don't know who they think they would be training. There was initially, you remember, right after, in reaction to the Newtown shootings, the suggestion was janitors should be trained in order to do this, or that perhaps school administrators. But then, of course, there were also people who thought that husky sixth graders, which didn't exist at Sandy Hook because it was a K through 4 school, but never mind facts. The husky sixth graders should have charged the shooter. You remember that one? All right. Let's see. Coming up on our second break, of course, and just getting ready to hit the button to send us into that. But, of course, my computer went to sleep because, well, that's what always happens with these things. All right. So finishing up on our first hour, we really do have to make a round of the rest of the news as well, but we had to give you the particular pet issues and in-depth spin on all of those issues here at Kagro in the Morning. That's what we do, and there's nobody around to say no, which is also part of what we do here. So my self-censorship. After the break, we'll change directions. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I said we were going to change directions, but first we'll change directions only slightly. Take slight right at the fork, like your computerized directions might tell you. Let's see. Gun related. We're not done with the gun just yet, even though there's so many other things we need to get to. Bloomberg Business Week has this one, and a companion piece following up on it from Bloomberg Politics. Been sitting in pocket a little while, March 28th, 2018, and important. Maybe you heard it in passing. If you don't know this one, you need to. Robert Mercer. That guy. Robert Mercer's secret adventures as a New Mexico cop. Did you miss this one? Did you happen to miss this one? Zachary Mider, M-I-D-E-R, for Bloomberg Business Week on this one. Why was the fabulously wealthy Trump donor wearing a badge and a gun in a tiny desert town? Answer, to obtain something that's impossible to buy. And what else would Robert Mercer, evil genius, volcano lair kind of guy, be doing but spending his time? Where does he spend his time these days now that he's retired from everything? Obtaining something that's impossible to buy. Why? Could be ideological, or could just be I can and you can't. I don't know. It's a little bit of both, I guess. Dig this story. Robert Mercer would probably would have flown into Roswell, New Mexico. Yes, the UFO place. From there, 1,800 miles from home, he would have traveled south through the high desert plains of southeast New Mexico, flat as a tortilla. Come on. All right. Anyway, past abandoned homesteads and irrigation machines moving in slow circles. His phone reception would have gotten spotty when he turned left off Highway 285. Very dramatic, this whole setting. He would have seen the bare limbs of a pecan orchard. Did you say pecan where you're from? Pecan. I always said pecan, but I think that's too northeastern. It's an orchard. And it has bare limbs, and he's passing it. That's really the point. A graveyard decked in plastic flowers. At the town hall in Lake Arthur, population 433. He would have met Police Chief William Norwood, the department's sole full-time employee. a barrel-chested man with 2 spare rifle magazines on his belt. There, Mercer, the fabulously wealthy computer scientist who helped bankroll the election of President Donald Trump, would have reported for duty as a volunteer policeman. If Mercer's trips to Lake Arthur resembled my recent visit, he might have climbed into the passenger seat of Norwood's police truck, whose black and white paint job is fading in the wind-whipped sand. He and Norwood might have rolled past the house where someone reported spotting a stolen car. A false alarm, it turns out. While monitoring radio chatter, the plutocrat and the chief might have jawed about the latest news in a town so small it has no stores. I doubt very much he's jawing about anything, Robert Mercer, but okay. The recent pursuit of a motorist across half the county. The record of the high school's 6-man football team. Reports of stolen pecans. Now you know why those limbs are bare. Pulling up a chair at an Italian restaurant in nearby Hagerman, the chief might have urged Mercer to try the lasagna. I don't know why this dramatic setup, but okay. For most of the past 6 years, as Mercer became one of the country's political kingmakers, he also was periodically policing Lake Arthur, according to the department. If he followed Norwood's protocols, and Norwood insists no volunteers get special treatment, he would have patrolled at least 6 days a year. He would have paid for travel and room and board and supplied his own body armor and weapon. Now, by the way, does all this sound familiar? If you're a longtime listener to the show, it does. Of course, you know about the volunteer auxiliary deputy programs in places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the other rich executive, though not nearly as rich as Robert Mercer, but also I think named Robert, the insurance guy, whose name escapes me at the moment. If I had a producer, I'd snap my fingers and have him hand it to me. But the guy who thought, who was participating in an arrest, which he really shouldn't have been doing, thought he was reaching for his taser, reached instead for an actual firearm and quote unquote accidentally killed a suspect. He's been sentenced to jail for that, of course. But that, I think, was my first exposure to these like volunteer auxiliary deputy police positions here. Now it turns out Robert Mercer is doing pretty much the same thing. Why? Until a few months ago, Mercer, 71, ran what is arguably the world's most successful hedge fund. He employs a phalanx of servants and bodyguards and owns a 203-foot yacht named the Sea Owl. He was the money behind Breitbart and Steve Bannon, whose fiery populism, wrong term, helped propel Trump to the White House. Not really. As well as the data firm Cambridge Analytica, which probably did more than Steve Bannon did, which shaped the campaign's messages. That's putting it kindly. Shortly after the election, Mercer donned a top hat and welcomed the president-elect to a costume party at his seaside mansion on Long Island, not in the volcano lair. What was a guy like that doing in the desert wearing a gun and a shiny badge? I was surprised when I first heard about Mercer's sojourns in Lake Arthur, but then I'm used to his surprises. During the 2.5 years I've covered Mercer, I've come to think of him as a hard-right version of that guy in the beer commercials, the most interesting man in the world. There seems to be an inexhaustible supply of incredible but true Mercer stories, including his pioneering research that begat Google Translate, his funding of a stockpile of human urine in the Oregon mountains. I did actually know about that. I never did get around to that story, but you can see why. Although, maybe you can't. I mean, honestly, stockpile of human urine. I don't know why. Read the linked story. We don't have time. His $1 million model train set, another story I don't know why of, but it's not linked, and his habit of whistling constantly, even during work meetings. By the way, it's a good time to bring up the difference between certifiably insane, crazy, nut, and eccentric, and the answer is money. If you have money and people need to beg you for it, you can do stuff like whistle your way through meetings because you're, essentially, look, you have, maybe it's social anxiety disorder, I don't know, but it gets a fancy name and or dismissed as eccentricity when you're rich and people need your money, and when you're poor, you're just, oh my God, that's the a-hole who won't stop whistling. Okay, that aside, the common threads in these stories are a fierce intelligence, a wide-ranging curiosity, and an utter indifference to the judgment of others. Like I said, a-hole, but he's got money. The story of his adventures in Lake Arthur, which hasn't previously been reported, adds yet another strand. It shows just how far a man of means will go to get something he can't buy, and here's the big point here, the right to carry a concealed firearm anywhere in America. You got that? The Mercers don't talk to the press, and Robert Mercer wouldn't tell me why he started volunteering for the Lake Arthur police. But come on. When I went there to see for myself, I found that it was unlike any police department I'd come across. Norwood and 3 part-timers are buttressed by 84 reserve officers, most of whom live hundreds or even thousands of miles away. There are Lake Arthur reservists in San Diego and Virginia Beach. Several are among the most elite soldiers on earth, former U.S. Navy SEALs. Many are high-dollar bodyguards or firearms instructors, and almost all of them are serious gun enthusiasts. On that count, Mercer fits right in. He once built a personal pistol range in his basement. People do that. Through a company he co-owns, Center Firearms Company, and it's British spelling of Center, T-R-E. He has a vast collection of machine guns and other weapons of war, as well as a factory in South Carolina that makes assault-style rifles. Over our lunch at Piccolino, the Italian place, Chief Norwood passed me a copy of his department's newsletter, The Blue Heeler, H-E-E-L, Blue Heel, you know. One picture shows reservists training in a 2-man sniper spotter team. The sniper is kitted out in a mesh veil for camouflage and appears to be firing from inside a kitchen. Another shows a door with a hole blasted through it, the result of an exercise in explosive breaching. The newsletter gave the impression that Norwood was running his department as a sort of high-octane club for guys who subscribe to guns and ammo. And what else could it be? Because, again, Lake Arthur, New Mexico, population 433. Sniper teams? Really? Not necessary. That's why there really are only 3 professional police there, but 84 reservists. And the answer is because you get to go and play soldier. Some of the people who go play actually were soldiers at some point, apparently. But the payoff is, as a quote-unquote law enforcement officer, you can carry your weapon with you concealed wherever you go. These the national reciprocity that gun enthusiasts are looking for to allow regular people to do this has never come to fruition and may never come to fruition. But a secret loophole allows people with enough money to fly themselves back and forth 6 times at minimum per year to the middle of nowhere, New Mexico, to pretend they're a cop in a town where there's virtually no crime and no additional police are even necessary. You can play with any machine gun you want and get that permission to carry concealed anywhere in America. That is what's going on here. And probably what's going on in Tulsa, too. It was hard to imagine these, but at least Tulsa's a larger city. You can figure on wanting more cops. It was hard to imagine these skills being put to heavy use in Lake Arthur, the article continues, where reservist officials' duties include finding lost pets. Even the coolest drills wouldn't explain why Mercer would go to the trouble of getting a Lake Arthur badge. With his connections in the gun world, he wouldn't need to travel all the way from Long Island to have some weekend fun on the range, and if he just wanted to serve the public and wear a uniform, he could choose from several police auxiliary programs without leaving his home county. Then I learned that in 2012, several of Mercer's associates had set up a nonprofit in Georgia, blandly named the Law Enforcement Education Organization. Sounds good, right? Among the founders were Mercer's son-in-law, George Wells, and Wells's longtime friend, Peter Pukish, P-U-K-I-S-H, both of whom were also Lake Arthur volunteers. Chairing the group was former Georgia Representative Robert Barr, remember him? A Mercer lawyer and National Rifle Association board member. I didn't realize that Barr was a Mercer lawyer, who got pranked in the 2006 mockumentary Borat. You remember that? The movie captures his sour expression when he's told the cheese he just ate was made from a woman's breast milk. That must have been something. Tax records suggest Mercer gave the group's sister foundation more than $400,000, and his gun company became a sponsor. And there's a note here that says, see note 1 below. We'll see when we get to that. The purpose of the group to educate local authorities across the country about the rights of off-duty police officers to carry concealed weapons. The group showed up at police conferences and handed out brochures and moon pies, because why wouldn't you hand out those? And I guess the guy who made the YouTube video had a couple of them. States vary widely in their approaches to regulating concealed weapons, but in 2004, Congress passed, at whose behest, one wonders, the Law Enforcement Officers Safety Act, declaring that police officers can carry concealed guns in any state with no need of a local license. The law applies to officers who are off-duty and out of their jurisdiction, and includes volunteer reservists. Ta-da! There's the loophole. The law made a police badge an immeasurably valuable item in places such as Suffolk County, New York, where previously, I guess, taxi medallions were the Bitcoin of the realm. That, of course, is where Mercer lives and where concealed carry permits are granted only rarely. Applicants must prove they face extraordinary personal danger. In 2016, the county rejected the request of a man who had helped the FBI take down an outlaw biker gang. Even if Mercer did get a local permit, it wouldn't be valid if he traveled to New York City or to most other states. So for people in Suffolk who want to carry, the Law Enforcement Officers Safety Act is a tantalizing way to cut through all of that, if they can find a police force that will grant them its tin. Since the law took effect, a few police and sheriff's departments around the country have been rumored to hand out badges to buddies or in exchange for cash. The gun community calls them badge factories, and they're right about that, and you should respect them for it. Questions about whether Lake Arthur was such a place swirled last year on a popular gun chat room after a noted firearms expert from North Carolina, who was also a reservist, got drunk and accidentally shot his brother-in-law in the leg. Norwood quickly stripped him of his badge because he's so super responsible. It's not clear exactly when or how Mercer became aware of Lake Arthur's Reserve Corps, but he became an officer on December 10th, 2011, and since then, Mercer and his son-in-law have supported the town generously. Not at all unlike the guy in Tulsa. Wasn't he paying for police cruisers, etc.? You just cough up the cash, and they let you have a badge and therefore allow you to carry anywhere in the country. That's the deal. Isn't that amazing? Anyway, what else have they done? Their foundation underwrote a grant for some of Lake Arthur's officers to get SWAT training in Las Vegas. Separately, Wells helped start a Reserve Officers Association that apparently directed tens of thousands of dollars to the department. At lunch, Norwood ordered a salad and insisted that his department was no badge factory. It's a big help to me, I'll tell you that, he said of the reserve program. It's better than going out on a domestic violence call way out in the country all by yourself. Yeah, take a billionaire with you. Norwood's head was closely shaved, and he had the hint of reddish stubble on his cheeks. He was dressed from head to toe in black tactical gear, and a patch on his chest gave his blood type as O positive. So close to universal, but no. Norwood refused to discuss Mercer or any other individual reservist, but said that if a person simply wanted concealed carry rights, volunteering for his squad wouldn't be worth the trouble. Department rules require 96 hours of patrol work and 20 hours of training a year. He added that while reservists are encouraged to carry their weapons off duty for protection, they're not allowed to use their concealed carry privileges for outside work. That's why he only brings billionaires in. They don't need outside work. Later, after I showed Norwood the LinkedIn accounts of two men who seemed to be doing just that, security contractors touting their ability to carry guns anywhere, the men faced, quote, severe disciplinary action, a department spokesman said. Norwood formed the reserve program in 2005, not long after he joined the department. With the nearest backup a half hour or more away, he didn't like the idea of patrolling solo, so he turned to a couple of Army buddies for volunteer help. That actually makes a certain amount of sense, right? The program expanded by word of mouth. At one point a few years ago, there were almost 150 reserve police officers. That'd be a ratio of 1 to every 2.9 residents. And Norwood, who prefers patrolling to paperwork, acknowledged he wasn't giving the program the oversight it needed. In 2016, a reserve captain took over administrative duties, tightened up the policies, and cut the number of reservists almost in half. Last year, Norwood stopped accepting new members altogether, but even this smaller force is enough to provide him with a visiting reservist or two on any given day free of charge. There may have been some abuses in the past, said the administrator, Oliver Brooks, who lives 200 miles away and joined us for lunch, but whenever we find out about them, we take action. All right. Well, there's an awful lot more to this, and I guess more fun stories about it. It runs on for some time, and we could probably finish the story, but I'll suggest instead that you finish the story on your own so that I can add something else to the picture. Another name or two that will make you say, all right, now come on. Really, I mean, you just about almost kind of sort of explained it in a way that makes it like, all right, Robert Mercer found out about this thing and he's taking advantage of it. And some other people are too, and it's a gun enthusiast club and they fly in from all over the country. But is it really a disturbing trend, a billionaires club of gun loophole badge factory kind of thing? Not really, right? Well, Zach Miter is back along with another guy whose name begins with Z. Zeke Faux, F-A-U-X, which is obviously a fake name. I mean, I guess that is, right? Here's the deal. I mean, I can tell it to you in a headline, but, you know, I'm not going to just settle for that. Koch, as in Koch brothers, bodyguards got police badges from the same tiny town as Mercer. This one just from the other day, April 11th. Bodyguards for the family of billionaire industrialists Charles and David Koch, you know them, used police badges from a tiny New Mexico town that authorized them to carry concealed weapons in all 50 states, according to documents seen by Bloomberg News. The Lake Arthur Police Department that awarded the badges for volunteer service is the same one that for years provided a similar perk to Robert Mercer, the 71-year-old New York hedge fund manager and key financial backer of President Donald Trump. You get the idea? I mean, I guess that's really all there is to it. We could probably stop there, but here's a little bit more detail. Koch Industries Incorporated's security unit obtained the badges for dozens of people over several years, including bodyguards employed directly by the Wichita, Kansas-based company and by an outside contractor, according to a person with knowledge of the arrangement. Bloomberg News was able to verify the names of 8 current or former Koch guards who had Lake Arthur badges. Koch and the outside contractor, Rimi Corporate Services, R-I-M-I, Rimi Corporate Services Incorporated, based in Virginia Beach, occasionally provided donations to the Lake Arthur Reserve Program, the person said. The town has 433 residents. Now, you know the background about the law and the loophole that enabled this stuff. I'll skip here to the Kochs are, of course, among the most influential conservative figures in the country, overseeing a political network that directs hundreds of millions of dollars to promote free market causes each year. Steve Lombardo, spokesman for Koch Industries, co-owned by the Koch brothers, declined to comment. I don't know anything about it. Also, says Michael Purdy, Rimi's founder, in a brief phone interview when asked about Koch bodyguards receiving Lake Arthur badges. Of course, you know all about it. Isidro Salazar, the mayor of Lake Arthur, terminated the reserve program last week after the publication of a Bloomberg Businessweek article about Mercer's membership. He also placed Police Chief William Norwood on administrative leave, saying the program, quote, got a little bit too big for him, and a lot of the reserves kind of took advantage of that fact. Salazar said he didn't know anything about the Koch bodyguards and that the town didn't have any records of gifts because they could have gone to 2 nonprofit groups associated with the Lake Arthur Reserve Program rather than to the police department. Norwood didn't respond to messages seeking comment. Now, next section here is called Email Mishap, which seems ironic as well. Members of the Lake Arthur Reserve Program have included martial arts champions, and the actor who played the villain in Free Willy 3, very important that he be armed. Dan Bilzerian, known as the King of Instagram for cavorting with topless models and machine guns on the social media site, was once a volunteer reservist, according to a person with knowledge of the matter. By the way, do you remember the King of Instagram, Dan Bilzerian? He is the gun enthusiast who actually was present at the Las Vegas shooting at the country music concert, and he ran off to get his gun out of his car. For some reason, he didn't have it on him, and then he was sure that he was going to be able to nail the shooter 32 stories up in the building across. He was going to take out his pistol and start firing wildly at an occupied Las Vegas hotel in the middle of all this before deciding, one, no, that probably wouldn't have been very smart, and two, the cops saying, "Are you effing crazy? We will haul your ass in cuffs to the station if you even try it." And so instead, he turned tail and left, which is what you should be doing, really, honestly, in a situation like that. And proof of the fact that having idiots like him walking around armed, not very likely in any real situation to be of any use to anyone. But here he is in this story. What do you know? One of these fake cops. In 2016, Bilzerian posted a photo of himself, Chief Norwood, and two clothed models in a room full of assault-style weapons. An apparent email mishap by Norwood provided a clue to the Coke connection. How do you like that? But his emails. On March 1st, after Bloomberg began asking questions about Mercer's involvement in the department, Norwood sent a program-wide message ordering volunteers not to speak to the media. And I guess he can boss, this is the one time he can boss around a bunch of billionaires. "We can all appreciate that the liberal fake media is on a witch hunt," Norwood wrote. Where do you suppose he got that language? While Norwood usually kept hidden the names of the other recipients of group emails, this time they were all visible to each other. Duh! Bloomberg News received 2 copies of the email, which listed 275 recipients and was able to identify 8 as current or former Coke guards through other documents, good sleuthing, including social media postings and state licensing records. The guards identified by Bloomberg News are mostly former military commandos, including ex-Navy SEALs. Since they attracted notice for their political spending almost a decade ago, the Cokes have been vilified by the left and have been subjected to frequent death threats. No doubt they actually need the bodyguards, or whatever. Maybe they don't need them, but you certainly have the right to have that. But hearkening back to the original story, and I'm surprised that there's no mention of that in this second story. Remember that the policy, supposedly the policy of the program under now suspended Chief Norwood was that it was against the rules to use the training provided by the Lake Arthur department, police department, for outside work. Here, just in the employ of Charles and David Koch, are 8 current and maybe more among former bodyguards, obviously using the loophole and the badge afforded to them by Lake Arthur for exactly that. And we did read in the first example of a Zach, which one was it, Zach or was it Zeke? Zach, I think, pointing this out to the chief and then having severe disciplinary action taken against them. No word about whether or not that has been taken against the Koch brothers guards, but it wouldn't matter because the program is suspended, and I guess that's all the disciplinary action anybody needs. All right, I'd love to go on and going back to the original Bloomberg article about that and read you the fun stories about individual foibles along the way, but I feel like a better use of our time is to range a little bit further out in what we've stored away in pocket, it being Friday. We'll have to see how else we can prepare you for the weekend, but a break is coming. And so let's take a quick look around here to see what we might do before checking out for our break. Let's see. Here's a tweet I put away for later. What else have we got here? Okay. A bigger story, but it's another Mercer-connected story. Would make a good segue, but a segue to Cambridge Analytica, SCL, and others that, we can't adequately explain before the break, and probably not the direction we're going to end up going in the last segment of the show. Anyway, all right, let's see. Oh, computer's gone to sleep again here. Time to bring this up and get ready to put together our break for our music for the break. Oh, yes, and one of the reasons that everything is on my my laptop is so prominently related to the Mercers is I still have a search result up for Mercer in Pocket, and that's the reason. All right. Well, we'll open things up to a wider look at the world during the next segment, although I may just dedicate the next segment to one topic, but one we have not touched on yet, or, we could do the roundup thing. I'll take 2 minutes to decide where I'll take you. For those of you listening live, that's an exciting cliffhanger. For those of you listening in the podcast, hang on 10 seconds and we'll be right back. Well, okay, a minute. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Man, I guess I still haven't decided. There's so many things that we could be doing, and well, you know what? Maybe I need to identify some evergreen type stories and just start recording for the summer. This summer is going to be a little bit spotty for me in terms of taking time off. It's the way it is with most people during the summer, but a lot coming up. We'll discuss that sometime when we have more leisure time, but the deadline's looming here. Here's what else we've got. Let's see. Just one quick stop on another gun story. It's not a major national story yet, but it really should be. But put it in the Respect Gun Culture files. I mean, everything belongs there, of course. And one of these days, I'm really going to have to organize put forth a more organized pushback on that and directly target the those who tout the gun culture myth. I mean, everything really needs to be ended already. But put this one in your files. From out of Kansas City, I've got this. Suspect in Brookside killing accidentally taped his talk about murder, police say. That is troubling, but the whole background of the story is really rather amazing. An 80-year-old man has been charged with murder in the shooting death last fall of Kansas City attorney Tom Pickert. This is the reporting, by the way, from the Kansas City Star of Ian Cummings and Glenn E. Rice. Thanks, guys, for the coverage on this one. Jackson County prosecutor Gene Peters Baker. I don't know if it's Gene or is it, are we talking about like foreign pronunciation, Jean Peters? But Baker, you tell me. Gene Peters Baker. We announced the charges Wednesday at a news conference at the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office in Kansas City. David Jungerman, or perhaps Jungerman, depending on your pronunciation, is charged with the first-degree murder and armed criminal action in the killing of Pickert, who was found shot to death on October 25th on the front porch of his home in the 200 block of West 66th Terrace, a day after Jungerman was served with property liens to satisfy a $5.75 million civil judgment Pickert had won against him. And can you believe that it took so long to figure out that this guy did it? The case had remained unsolved for months. In November, Kansas City police said Jungerman, who had fallen under media scrutiny after the shooting, was not a suspect. Isn't that interesting? It's a day after Pickert wins a $5.75 million judgment against him. He gets killed. And it's not that nobody thought, well, maybe it's the guy who just was put on the hook for nearly $6 million to him. They did think that. I guess they just couldn't put the case together. Anyway, but Jungerman accidentally recorded himself. Yeah, saying he killed Pickert. within weeks of the shooting, according to a probable cause affidavit supporting the murder charge. And I guess they got probable cause now anyway, but they had to get a hold of that tape first. I'm sure it's a disturbing, disgusting situation, and the FBI is at fault, right? The recording was from a court hearing in Vernon County, according to the documents, but it appeared Youngerman never turned off the recorder he had been using and kept it running after he left court and met up with another person. And who doesn't leave court and confess to murders immediately after, right? This is what was on the tape here. People know that I murdered that son of a ellipsis, and then that's it. I don't know whether he ever completes the thought. That's what he's quoted as saying on a tape. Yeah, that's bad. Speculation had fallen on Youngerman within hours of the shooting, in part because of his connection to Pickert. Youngerman, a farmer and maker of baby furniture, who lives in Raytown, had recently lost a $5.75 million lawsuit to Pickert, who practiced personal injury law. The day before the shooting, Youngerman was served with property liens to pay the judgment. Youngerman told an employee in March that, quote, that he, quote, killed a lawyer with a gun and gotten away with it. According to court documents, he did it because the lawyer stole his money, he thought. He won in court. That was basically it. Emily Regal, Pickert's widow, thanked police for their investigative work in the tragic death of her husband. We are grieving, she said. We are desperately trying to find our way forward. According to court documents, Youngerman shot Pickert with a 17 caliber firearm, an obscure weapon used by farmers and ranchers to kill pests. Investigators also found that Youngerman had transferred money and property to his daughter. Youngerman's assets totaled about $33 million. Farmer and maker of baby furniture. Salt of the earth. $33 million. Youngerman had withdrawn $5 million from his bank account. During the investigation, police examined hundreds of hours of video from surveillance cameras from at least two businesses. In the video, a van matching the description of Youngerman's was visible, but not his license plate. In the lawsuit, Pickert was representing one of four men Youngerman shot within a month. Let me read it again. Within a month. Four men Youngerman shot within a month, the space of a month, in 2012. All were men he encountered at night in a building associated with his baby furniture business in Kansas City's Northeast neighborhood. Youngerman, who said the men were stealing copper and that he acted in self-defense, is appealing the judgment. He was not charged in those shootings. The guy has been shooting people left and right, but whatever. We don't suspect him of shooting the lawyer who sued, right? Why not? In interviews with the Star, Youngerman denied being at the scene of the Pickert shooting. There's more to the story, but I'll just put it this way. The guy's been shooting people left and right, still has the gun, whatever. He kills the lawyer. I want to put that out there. Respect. I want you to respect and understand gun culture. You people have to reach out. The guy was being sued for injury and or, I don't know, maybe he killed somebody. He has wrongful death of people he had improperly shot. He won the case. Pickert won the case on behalf of these other guys, I guess. And they had a dispute. They had their day in court. Pickert won. Youngerman was ordered to pay damages. He didn't do it. Pickert got a lien against his $33 million in assets and other properties in order to force him to pay what the court said he owed. Youngerman murdered Pickert rather than pay. Please, ladies and gentlemen, if you at any point during the upcoming day or weekend feel like you can't respect gun culture, I urge you to reach deep within yourself and find a way to respect this honorable, patriotic fraternity of, I don't know what. I give up. I can't even fake this sentence. How could you? I want to smash this into the faces of people who are constantly whining about the lack of respect for gun culture. I don't know what they imagine gun culture really is. And I know that they exclude from gun culture the vast majority. Anybody who gets in trouble is obviously, you're out. Just like with the deputy programs. Oh, you got caught? You're out. You're not part of gun culture. Gun culture is about fine, upstanding, salt of the earth, white men and women, farmers, baby furniture makers, perhaps, who through their own hard work and resolve to pull themselves up by their bootstraps have amassed $33 million in assets, whatever. Great, good for you. And murder anyone who threatens it or might even be in the neighborhood of where you work, let's say. And, okay. I mean, I guess I'm done with the story, but just once again, F gun culture and the people who are crying about defending it. Screw you. You're all a bunch of nuts. Yes, I'm sure there are honorable people among you, but the gun culture, to the extent that there is such a thing, is full of lunatics and scumbags, and you should just acknowledge that. You are the exceptions to the rule if you are, a Boy Scout with his gun at this point. And stop pretending that the rest of gun culture is like you. You're the outliers. Be proud of that. Stand up for yourselves. Why do you associate yourself with these scumbags? It's time for you to break out on your own. That's my advice to you. I know nothing about this situation, but I figured I'd advise you. Why not? All right. There's more in the world than just this. But I don't even know where to go from here. You should be aware of the fact that, any one of the investigators on the Russia probe could be fired today. Absolutely. You should be aware of the fact that Michael Cohen is up to his neck in danger in this. You should be aware of the fact that some of the materials seized in the raids were audio tapes of his telephone conversations with Donald Trump and with others with whom he had business dealings. And so therefore we are likely to find out something amazingly discrediting about some or all of the figures wrapped up in the circle of Donald Trump. That will be no surprise, but there will be no shortage of astounding headlines, although we may have to wait for those tapes because so far there haven't been many leaks in the Mueller investigation. But I remind you one more time, as the president gets set to fire Mueller and Rosenstein and everybody else, that this is not their raid. They weren't handling that, and they don't have those materials. But screw that. That's just a stupid technicality. And so, time to move on to one or another of our last bits for Friday. I've got a couple of them. And where should we go with this one? Let's do these two together. One, an interesting Business Insider piece, which, if I'm not mistaken, will make it impossible for me to open because I once had an ad blocker installed on my computer. Do you know that I can't get rid of it? Any technical help on the ad blocker plus that I put on here turned out to be more trouble than it was worth. And I guess the news sites have gotten savvy to the idea of having that on there, and they block you from content. Now, every time I open up an article to read it to you now, it says, looks like you're using an ad blocker. So I stopped using the ad blocker. I went through their instructions to whitelist their site. Didn't matter. Once it was there, once you had blocked ads on their site, they never let you back in. So great. So I uninstalled, or thought I uninstalled, Ad Blocker Plus. Makes no difference. I got to clear all my cookies. I'm sure that's the issue, but it's just as annoying as hell, and I hate it. Okay. That being the case, Business Insider is going to let me read this after all. Father of virtual reality, whoever that is, he's a guy with dreadlocks, that's interesting. Father of virtual reality says, Facebook and Google are dangerous behavior modification empires, resulting from a tragic mistake. Ariel Schwartz wrote this for Business Insider, and I said, that sounds pretty good, and it works in conjunction with another article I hope to bring you. Let's see. Shall we do it by bullet points here in case we can't get through the article? All of the troubles surrounding Facebook and Google can be traced back to a mistake. Interesting idea. According to TED speaker, one of the TED Talks guys, and virtual reality visionary Jaron Lanier, or Lanier, I don't know, Lanier. Maybe some of you who are tech dudes know this guy. You probably knew who I was talking about as soon as I said dreadlocks. At this point, Lanier said, we shouldn't call companies like Facebook social networks. Call them behavior modification empires. Interesting. Let's have you make the case for it. Lanier believes that the only solution is to essentially turn back the clock and remake that early, fateful decision to keep the internet free. That's the mistake. Now I'm concerned. He received a standing ovation from the audience, which was filled with prominent members of the Silicon Valley tech community. Now, I guess the talk was given in Vancouver, Canada. That's the dateline here. Jaron Lanier, the author and programmer, widely considered to be the founding father of virtual reality, gave one of the most provocative early talks at this year's TED conference in Vancouver. During his talk, he posited that all of the troubles surrounding tech giants like Facebook and Google can be traced back to a globally tragic mistake with roots in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Early digital culture, he said, had a sense of lefty socialist mission about it. That's a good thing, you would think, right? That's what he said, noting that a common sentiment in Silicon Valley at the time held that everything on the internet must be purely public and free. At the same time, there was and is an ongoing love affair with tech entrepreneurship and industry titans like Steve Jobs. How do you celebrate entrepreneurship when everything is free? The solution is, or at least was, ads, Lanier said. Services like Google and Facebook were free with ads. In the beginning, it was cute. Then the customers and other entities who used the system became more experienced and clever. Advertisement turned into behavior modification. Negative stimuli tends to rise to the top of social networks, Lanier said, shifting gears a little bit. This is because negative emotions rise up faster than positive ones, and it ultimately makes it easier for misinformation and other manipulative pieces of information to take over, the fake news phenomenon. At this point, Lanier said, we shouldn't call companies like Facebook social networks, call them behavior modification empires. Lanier believes the only solution is to essentially turn back the clock and remake that early fateful decision to keep the internet free. Consider how things might be different, he said, if we paid for things like search and social networking, perhaps with subscription fees or micropayments. Just as companies like Netflix and Amazon have helped stoke the world of high-quality peak TV by convincing people on the internet to pay for TV and films, we should consider a world of paid peak social media, where misinformation would be hard to find. Instead, high-quality factual information could take its place, Lanier suggested. Very interesting. An interesting take on things, and then a little bit of explanation of like what are TED Talks. Okay, I've got a couple of things that go with that, and I'm rushing to try to get to them. One is a David Dayen piece, always a valuable thing, written for and published in the New Republic, Ban Targeted Advertising. As Mark Zuckerberg testifies to Congress about Facebook's privacy failures, here's a wholesale solution for politicians to consider. Let me give you at least a taste of this one before jumping to one other that I want to give you a taste of. For the first 35 years of my life, like most Americans, I was exposed to lots of advertising. I absorbed billboards and print ads and direct mailers and television commercials and radio jingles. I learned about available products and services and chose which ones I wanted. Some businesses I patronized survived and others didn't. The economy mostly proceeded apace. Then, over the last decade, this form of marketing became seen as insufficient, or rather, the rise of digital media made a more invasive form of marketing too irresistible. Instead of having to cast a wide net and searching for potential customers, advertisers now could know every intimate detail about those customers beforehand. They began targeting people geographically and behaviorally based on common interests or things they liked in social media or what they wrote in emails to friends. The surveillance economy was born. Well, the surveillance economy should die. This manner of advertising doesn't serve the public, and it's not even clear it serves advertisers. It facilitates monopoly, as those with the biggest data troves receive all the ad dollars. That centralizes the potential for and magnitude of abuse, with big data used to discriminate against groups, steer vulnerable people to financial scams, and meddle in U.S. elections. Cambridge Analytica's scraping of 87 million user profiles through a simple personality quiz, and then weaponizing that information on behalf of Donald Trump's presidential campaign, revealed how information on social media is inherently insecure. Now, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg is appearing before Congress to explain how this won't happen again. But instead of leaving regulation to Facebook or devising one Rube Goldberg scenario after another to try to protect consumer data, the U.S. can take one simple legal step to roll back this dystopian nightmare: ban targeted advertising. Here's what we've learned about personalized ads in just the past few weeks. Advertisers armed with big data can ensure housing or employment advertisement don't reach African Americans or Hispanics, discriminating on the basis of race. Scam companies and grifters can use targeted ads to find an environment of suckers prone to believing their pitches. The capture and storage of personal information itself creates a target, prone to data harvesting and breaches. Companies luring advertisers want to expand this data trove. Facebook recently sent a doctor to talk with top hospitals about acquiring patient data, which could violate medical confidentiality rules. Yeah, I would think so. Facebook and Google, the surveillance economy's leading lights, collect this data primarily as a resource for advertisers. Digital ad spending surpassed television ad spending globally for the first time. Targeted data is prized. A stated goal of the proposed merger between AT&T and Time Warner is to collect a broader range of viewer data to conduct stronger ad targeting. Do the benefits of targeted ads for consumers outweigh the risks and downsides of mass data collection? That's unclear. Back when targeted ads didn't follow me around the internet, I still somehow found what I wanted to buy. The social value is dubious, if they even work. We've all had the experience of buying something online and then getting ads for the same product for weeks as if we needed 2 pairs of the same shoes. Most surveys of targeted ads are conducted by advertisers and are completely unreliable. Is targeted advertising good for media companies that get top dollar for access to their audience? No. Facebook and Google have decimated brand value by tracking people across the web, not only when they visit the Wall Street Journal or 17 magazine. Do advertisers get more value from personalization? Not proven. Tech platforms have repeatedly been caught lying to advertisers about the reach and effectiveness of their ads. Procter & Gamble, the world's largest advertiser, cut its budget for targeted digital ads last year because they found it to be a waste of money. There's nothing wrong with media companies sampling their audiences to determine average age or income or voting preference. Market research has been a staple of advertising for decades. But when you build specific profiles of individuals, copy the information, and distribute it for use by advertisers, problems emerge. And the government cannot enforce what it cannot see, so the abuses occur far under the radar. It's obvious the surveillance economy's biggest practitioners won't police themselves. Zuckerberg has been apologizing for Facebook's extraction of user data for 14 years. He has alternately said Facebook would globally apply European data privacy requirements, and then that it wouldn't. He has said that Facebook's systems prevented hate speech and genocide in Burma, and human rights groups called him a liar. Facebook now says it will demand authentication for political advertisers and inform users whose data was improperly shared. But we should not expect a for-profit company to perform the activities of a government regulator. Always good advice. There's no question the U.S. government has the right to regulate advertising and even limit it. The FTC, Federal Trade Commission, monitors advertising and marketing to prohibit unfair or deceptive practices and enforce truth in advertising laws. The U.S. even regulates the volume, yes, the actual sound volume of television ads. Remember that? And there's already precedent for banning ads in the U.S. The Public Health Cigarette Smoking Act banned cigarette ads on TV and radio in 1971. Smokeless tobacco ads in 1986. You get the idea. The ban he proposes, David Dayen again, would be rather straightforward. The U.S. would disallow all individually targeted ads with large fines or even removal from the public airwaves for repeated violations. Nothing tied to a user's identity should be used to serve them a particular message. Companies would have to make all ads on its networks publicly viewable and searchable so regulators can oversee them. It's a very interesting idea. There's more, of course, to the article, and I encourage you to take a look at it. And now, if I can find it, one last piece of this puzzle to add, and I'm trying, I'll scan. I wonder if it's the best way to deal with this is to just scan down or to try and get a search for it. And it's a little further back than I thought. Written, again, by one of our frequent go-to people, if I can just dig it up, Zeynep Tufekci, which we decided that was the mangled pronunciation that we were going to go with. Let's see if I can call it up that way. But she had a piece, as I recall, in the New York Times. Yeah, there we are. And maybe she had her own tech talk on this one. And she had a proposal as well. I bet that's not even it. But this is because this looks like it's from further back, November of 2017, and she's giving a TED talk. We're building a dystopia just to make people click on ads. That was her TED talk. But I think she had an idea, and I'm really annoyed that I can't bring it more quickly to hand. But she had a slightly different proposal that sort of lives in between the TED talk that we were just mentioning and what David says, banning targeted ads. And it was a proposed system for, I think, micropayments along the along the lines of the suggestion from the TED talk, that we could sort of retake control of the internet if we were paying customers along the way, rather than consumers of free products underwritten by advertising. And that was an intriguing possibility. And everybody's been trying the exploration work on micropayments has been underway for a long, long time, and would be terrific on a number of fronts. Not just getting rid of targeted advertising, but if people were equipped with the ability to actually throw spare change into the hat here to keep the show running, I think that they would be more interested in doing it. If you really could throw a quarter in the bucket for each show that you download, it would be a lot easier to collect the money that it really takes to produce a quality program and pay people to do it. It doesn't look like I'm going to be able to come up with Zeynep's piece anytime soon, as we are running out of time for today. But as soon as I find it, I'm going to keep searching for it even after the show is over, and I'll provide it to Scott and give you a chance to read through it at your leisure over the weekend. We will, of course, be back on Monday, unless, Donald Trump really goes crazy over the weekend. And maybe we'll be back before then as he fires some or all of the people investigating him and his links to Russia and everything else that goes along with it. But in the meantime, I will hand you over to the care of Justice Putnam, who will bring you his West Coast Speakeasy, Cookbook and Speakeasy, and all the stories that I wasn't able to get to today, and maybe I'll send him the Zeynep story here too, and he can share it with you. All right, well, I guess there's just I've done none of the tagging work that I really need to have a production assistant do when I put these stories aside, so that it would be easy to pull it up and share it with you, and I could have given you at least the headline, but not to be. Too bad, so sad. Time now to hand things over to Justice, and let's see, I'll bring up his message about what's coming next. I'm still hoping to find this piece as I scan through, and it's just not gonna happen, and I should just acknowledge that already. Okay, over to Skype then to bring you up to date on what you can expect on the program immediately following, right here on Netroots Radio. And if you're listening by podcast, go back to Netroots Radio and consider making the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy a part of your morning routine, early morning routine if you happen to be on the West Coast, late morning into the afternoon otherwise. Or if you're overseas, well, have at it. Do it whenever you like. What has he got for you today? Let's see, starting off in the Bistro Cafe. By forcing Trump and his fixer to face the Southern District of New York courtroom, Mueller has run a classic football end-around play. Just to give you a little bit of a sports metaphor. You need that on a Friday morning. Then on the rest of the menu, former GOP Texas Congressman Steve Stockman back in the news Wow, found guilty of 23 felonies. Not a huge surprise, but the number is pretty big. We'll find out what they were. After this, CIA Director Mike Pompeo can't remember if Trump asked him to obstruct the Russia probe, but he's pretty sure Trump didn't do anything wrong. And the Seattle Seahawks postponed Colin Kaepernick's workout with the team after he refuses to abandon his protest against police violence and systemic racism. What did they think exactly that they were getting into? Okay, after their break, they'll move on to the chef's table, where the really interesting and esoteric stuff happens. This time, where the North Korean malware, not seen since 2014 attacks on Sony, has now returned and is raising the possibility of future destructive attacks. And the White House doesn't seem to know that if you screw with scientists, scientists will screw you back. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef de Cuisine.
From Daily Co's Radio.
Justice
on
Putnam.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Thanks for hanging in there. Yeah, another weird mix of observations for a Friday show. We'll be back on Monday. Things will only get weirder. And, wow, I mean, just hang in there. And again, if there's a wild-ass firing, come back to Netroots Radio. We'll be on the air to discuss it.